Hello YouTube, this is Scott with Linux for Today, and in this video what I'm going to cover excuse me, is we're going to dual boot our computer. Currently what I have running, this is in a virtual box, but this does also work. These exact steps also work on just regular hardware. I've already got my box set up, so I'm not going to show you how to dual boot on a physical machine. We're just going to use a virtual box here. Again, it works out the same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to log in to our Windows machine. Now there's a few things that we need to remember. It is best to have the older software installed first. This is if you were to like dual boot XP and Windows 7, you'd want XP installed first. That way Windows 7 will detect XP, but not vice versa. So that's something to keep in mind. Now when you're dual booting Windows and Linux, it is best to have Windows installed first, basically for the same reason. Grub knows how to detect Windows, but Windows doesn't necessarily know how to detect Grub. So what we're going to do is have Windows installed first. It's also works out better if Windows is on the first drive in your array or in your serial. Basically, you just want it as drive 0 or something like that, and you put Linux on the secondary drive. All right, so with that said, what we have going on here is we're at our regular Windows 7 desktop. What we'd want to do is we'd want to put our CD or a thumb drive in. In this case, what I'm going to use is Linux Mint 17.1 Rebecca Cinnamon 64-bit. This window is going to pop up. This will pop up on YouTube after you put your CD in. We're just going to close that window, and then what we're going to do is restart Windows. Now, what you may or may not end up having to do is go into your BIOS and change it to where it boots off a CD or off a thumb drive, whatever you decided to set that up as, which is going to be outside the scope of this video because there's just so many different BIOSes. There's so many different ways to get in. There's so many different settings. But what you're looking for is you want to change the boot order. And that's a common phrase across all BIOS. So just go Google how to change boot order on whatever you have, whether it's Toshiba, whether it's a Dell, or whatever. And you want to change the boot order to where the CD is going to be booted from first. This can be a temporary setting, or you can leave it that way if you really want to. That just means it's going to look at the CD-ROM before it looks at the hard drive. So what we already did is we've moved past that point, and we booted up, and this is the Linux Mint installation screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start Linux Mint just by hitting the Enter key. And Linux Mint is going to boot up here. Now this is a live DVD, so it's not doing anything at all to your hard drive yet. So if you've never looked at Linux Mint and you just want to get in there and play around with it, it's highly advised you do that. It's also highly advised that you back up any files that you want to save, just in case something goes wrong.
Hi everyone, I'm Tat Young Ko from the Windows Azure marketing team. Today I'm going to talk about Windows Azure and its benefits and show you how you can use it. Let's take a look. Today I'm going to talk about Windows Azure, Microsoft's cloud computing platform, and explain why it's a great platform for developing your apps. So first, let's look at why cloud. To understand this, we need to look at the design principles of cloud computing. At a very fundamental level, this entire concept is one of sharing resources. If we could share effectively, we could stop the waste of resources. All those computers running workloads or applications that are on all the time cost a lot of money, and they require highly paid staff to manage them. And most of the time, they're only using 20 to 30% of the compute capacity that's dedicated to them. So drilling into this, we see that one of the most important points is economics. As this chart indicates, the larger the data center, the cheaper the underlying total cost of ownership is. This is primarily because if you walk to your local power company and say you need to buy a billion gigaflops of power, you get a cheaper price. Same thing with data centers. You get a better deal if you're running at scale. And not only that, but when you run at this scale, you have to automate almost everything, and this automation makes the total cost of ownership cheaper. You can only afford to do this if you're very large. This is a considerable investment. Which brings us to Microsoft. Microsoft offers real-world experience with massive scale deployments that are unmatched. We've built apps and services such as Outlook.com, Bing, Xbox Live, and Office 365 on cloud technology. As an example of the kind of reach we're talking about, Office 365 is now used by more than 20% of all enterprise organizations worldwide. There are over 5 billion Bing queries monthly and over 40 million Xbox Live users. So all of this technology has been used to build Windows Azure. So essentially, Windows Azure is a broad stack of services that runs in our data centers globally. Think of the different services as building blocks. These services can be categorized into 3 classes: infrastructure services, which are lower-level building blocks; data services that provide storage and data management capabilities to apps; and app services, which provide different capabilities to rapidly develop apps, scale, and run apps at a global scale. In a physical sense, Windows Azure is built on data centers across the world. Let's now take a look at the global scale that Windows Azure operates in. We have data centers in 8 global regions across the different continents, 4 in the US, 2 in Europe, 2 in Asia. We also recently announced Windows Azure availability in China. These are gigantic in their scale and operations. Each data center is about 7 to 10 times the size of a football field, and their power utilization efficiency is about twice that of a large enterprise data center. We also have global support with local teams around the world, so you can be sure that you're taken care of if you run into any issues. Windows Azure provides several benefits, and so now let's drill into some of these. The first is time to market. Instead of waiting days or even weeks for IT to procure and provision servers, you can easily provision resources immediately. You can develop and deploy within minutes. Reducing the time to market means that you can get your app out there in the market to your users as quickly as possible. The speed and agility that this gives you also means you can reiterate quickly to improve on your apps. Open and flexible. We realize that you'll want to run a variety of workloads in the cloud. With Windows Azure, we of course provide first and best experience and support for Microsoft workloads, but at the same time, we've embraced other open technologies. In enterprises, Java and .NET are still mostly used, but developers are also using PHP, Python, and other languages in addition. Windows Azure supports all of these languages and more. We provide out-of-the-box experience for open frameworks like Hadoop, web frameworks like WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal. We also provide first-party SDKs for developing apps using Android, iOS, or Windows phones. In addition to the breadth of the platform, it's important to note that using Windows Azure is not an all-or-nothing proposition. You can use most services independently of each other. For example, you could use storage without compute. And what you want to use and how you want to really use it is really up to you. And finally, economics. With the cloud, you're only paying for what you use. This means that you have great cost savings and can achieve great efficiencies. You're saving money for any app that has variable computing needs. For some of you, this also means that you can free up capital from infrastructure investments and put it to other use. So these are the benefits of using Windows Azure. Let's take a look at how you could use it. One way to use Windows Azure is to extend your infrastructure. Windows Azure Infrastructure Services allows you to spin up and tear down virtual machines as needed. There is no hardware provisioning necessary, and you can scale efficiently for your needs. We understand many of you already have line of business apps that are on-premises. You can take advantage of Windows Azure by extending those apps into the cloud. With Windows Azure, you can scale out your app to multiple instances to handle unpredictable usage. You can also connect with on-premises Active Directory or integrate using Windows Azure Virtual Networks. By extending your infrastructure, you get the best of both worlds by leveraging existing assets and new capabilities in the cloud. Another way to utilize virtual machines is for dev and test. Anyone that creates custom applications needs a dev and test environment. developers need specific tools installed, while the test environment must replicate the world in which the new application will be deployed. Given the cost and time required to provision physical servers, it's become common to use virtual machines to do this. And with Windows Azure, you can basically log into the Windows Azure Management Portal and create virtual machines using Windows Azure Infrastructure Services, and you can supply your own VM images or use VHDs provided by Windows Azure. And remember, we support both Windows Server and Linux. Once these virtual machines exist, developers can use them to build and test a new application, customizing the VMs as they see fit. And why would you want to do this? Low cost and speed. Windows Azure VMs are available to users in a few minutes versus deploying them in your own data center, which can take days or weeks. Also, an organization would typically pay for VMs by the hour. With the cloud and Windows Azure, you're only paying for what you use. So again, you're getting great cost efficiencies. And lastly, you get a gallery of images to readily choose from, like Windows Server, SQL Server, and various Linux distributions. All of this makes Windows Azure a great platform for doing dev and test. You can also build websites with Windows Azure Websites. This is a platform as a service solution, and it's great if you want to quickly build and deploy new sites, do dev and test, or migrate an existing site that's already in production. Windows Azure Websites has support for great features like custom domains, SSL, auto-scaling, and provides an SLA on single standard instances. You can create new applications from scratch or deploy existing ones built in ASP.NET, PHP, Python, or Node.js. It's that flexible. It's also very scalable, making it easy for you to scale up your site to larger instances or scale out to multiple ones. And finally, it's secure with enterprise-grade availability with support for SSL and Active Directory authentication, making it possible to build applications for business workloads. Next is mobile. With Windows Azure Mobile Services, you can easily and quickly build cross-platform mobile apps that scale. Mobile Services provides a turnkey solution for storing data in the cloud, authenticating users, sending push notifications, and adding server-side business logic. By allowing you to leverage the full suite of Windows Azure services, including Active Directory, Service Bus, and websites, as well as Microsoft's global network of data centers, Mobile Services is perfect for both consumer-facing apps that respond to variable demand and employee-facing apps that require high availability and enterprise-grade security. And finally, we have Windows Azure Media Services. This is a platform-level service that enables developers to build solutions for ingesting, processing, managing, and delivering media content. This is built on top of the infrastructure of Windows Azure and IaaS Media Services. You have access to both Microsoft and third-party technologies that are curated, ready to use, and integrated into a single platform, simplifying the creation of end-to-end media solutions. Windows Azure has had great momentum. We have more than half of Fortune 500 companies using Windows Azure, and we're doubling compute and storage capacity every 6 months. To put it into perspective, in the 2 minutes it takes to brew yourself a cup of coffee, Windows Azure Active Directory has already processed over 1 million authentications from many devices and users around the world. These are some of the customers that have used Windows Azure and have had great success with it. And part of the reason why they've invested in our platform is that they trust us. Windows Azure represents our massive investment in the cloud and takes advantage of our experience in the industry. Today, we run some of the largest global services securely and efficiently, such as Bing or Office 365, and we run over 200 global services 24/7 with these stats to show you how large-scale and global our operations are. You can rest assured that security and operational efficiency is at our core. The other concern that you might have is resiliency. With Windows Azure, everything is designed to fail because resources are plentiful. This means that we can take a different approach when building applications. We all know that any part of your app can fail, but if your web server tier fails, we want to make sure that your application can keep on working. How you do this is by having multiple instances of your web tier. Any of these copies can fail, but Windows Azure can make sure that it detects and recovers from these failures by spinning up a new instance. The platform also makes sure that your application instances are separated across redundant parts of the underlying physical infrastructure. In Windows Azure, we call these fault domains. Using Windows Azure Storage as an example, if you give a file to Windows Azure, it saves that file 3 times in 3 different fault domains. If any copies of the file fail, the platform creates another copy. With this, we make sure that your data is always safe when you store it in Windows Azure. So in summary, I hope you enjoyed learning about Windows Azure and the different ways you can use it for developing your apps. Today we looked at the benefits of Windows Azure, such as time to market, being able to deploy and develop your apps quickly, being open and flexible, having support for many languages, tools, and frameworks, and economics, being able to achieve great cost efficiencies by using Windows Azure. We looked at the different ways you could use Windows Azure, such as extending your infrastructure, dev and test, building websites, mobile apps, or media solutions. You can learn more and get started by signing up for a free trial at windowsazure.com. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful. You can sign up for a free trial of Windows Azure at windowsazure.com and start taking advantage of the cloud today.
Right-click on the Parallels desktop icon and select New to create a new virtual machine. From the Parallels wizard, click Install Windows or another OS from a DVD or image file and click Continue. Parallels Desktop will automatically discover any valid installation media and include the option in the list. In this case, we have downloaded the 64-bit edition of Windows 10 from Microsoft's website. If you can see your desired software, click Continue and then enter your product key if necessary before clicking Continue once again. While we set up your Windows virtual machine, we'll automatically tune it for what you'll use it for the most. Productivity applications, design or development, even gaming. Some of these profiles are only available in the Business and Pro editions of Parallels Desktop. After clicking Continue, you can verify the location and name of your virtual machine, as well as customize your virtual machine settings. The Parallels wizard will automatically install Windows for you, and then launch your virtual machine when the process is complete. By default, your virtual machine will be in coherence mode, allowing you to quickly switch between Mac and Windows seamlessly.
Salut tout le monde, c'est Darkin Tuto. Donc aujourd'hui on va voir comment personnaliser la nouvelle version de Windows sortie par Microsoft hier, donc le 29 juillet 2015, donc Windows 10. Donc vous savez, Windows 10 inclut de nouvelles fonctionnalités comme Cortana, Microsoft Edge et même un nouvel explorateur de fichiers. Il inclut aussi le Windows Store qui est renouvelé. Il existait déjà sous Windows 8.1, mais là il est renouvelé. Il y a aussi un truc qui sert à rien, c'est Microsoft Smart Screen, Windows Smart Screen, pardon. Donc ça sert strictement à rien, c'est pour voir, quand vous téléchargez un fichier et que vous le lancez, s'il n'est pas édité par un éditeur connu par Microsoft, et bien il va l'empêcher de le lancer. Donc ça, je trouve pas trop ça utile parce que ça empêche d'installer certains logiciels. Donc je vous montrerai comment le désactiver dans une autre vidéo. Donc aujourd'hui on va voir comment le personnaliser en 15 minutes, pas plus. Donc la première chose qu'on va faire, c'est changer le fond d'écran. Donc dans la description vous allez avoir des fonds d'écran. Donc il y en aura beaucoup plus que 2. Mais moi j'en ai mis 2. Donc il y en a un qui pèse 1 MO 41, l'autre 722. Donc celui-là, il se trouve qu'il est assez bien. Celui-là aussi, mais je préfère le deuxième. Donc voilà, donc c'est à vous de choisir. Donc pour définir un fond d'écran à votre bureau, c'est très simple, comme les autres versions de Windows. Clic droit, choisir comme arrière-plan du bureau. Voilà. Et voilà, avec un arrière-plan du bureau et une barre des tâches moche. Vous allez voir pourquoi je dis une barre des tâches moche, parce qu'elle est personnalisable. Tout est personnalisable avec le nouveau Windows. Tout, presque. Le menu démarrer, le centre de notif, la barre de son, tous les trucs, là, la batterie, etc., etc. Donc je vous montrerai aussi dans une prochaine vidéo comment redimensionner une image sans logiciel, juste avec aperçu. Donc voilà, on a notre fond d'écran. Donc maintenant ce qu'on va faire, c'est changer les couleurs de la barre des tâches. Donc pour faire ça, on va aller dans les paramètres. Donc on va le mettre en plein écran, ce sera beaucoup mieux. Personnalisation. On va aller dans couleurs. On va choisir automatiquement une couleur du thème à partir de mon arrière-plan, je vous conseille. Et je vous conseille de l'afficher la couleur du menu démarrer, de la barre des tâches et du centre de notif. Voilà, vous voyez que ça va, que c'est déjà beaucoup plus beau par rapport à avant. Mais ce n'est pas tout. On a aussi l'écran de verrouillage. Donc pour définir un écran de verrouillage, vous cliquez ici sur image, parcourir. Bon, moi je vais sur mon bureau parce que c'est dans le bureau, fond d'écran, et je mets la même. Ici on a un aperçu, vous pouvez mettre choisir une application. Moi je vais mettre météo ici. Ou non, je vais mettre calendrier. Et dans thème, vous pouvez soit choisir un thème personnalisé, un thème par défaut de Windows et des thèmes moches à contraste élevé. Je sais pas qui utilise ces thèmes, mais en tout cas ceux qui utilisent ces thèmes étaient habitués sûrement à Windows 95, parce que c'est quasi les mêmes thèmes que Windows 95. Même si je pense que Windows 95 a un design un peu plus design que ça. Donc moi je vais renommer le thème. Hein. Je vais mettre mon thème. Je vais vous montrer vite le contraste élevé. Voilà, donc c'est vraiment moche. Hein. Je sais pas qui utilise ça. Donc je vais mettre mon thème. Hein. Voilà. Donc à se demander pourquoi il n'y a plus les thèmes aéro. Mais ça, même avec Windows 8, il n'y avait plus les thèmes aéro. C'est pas trop grave. Moi je n'aime pas aéro parce que ça use beaucoup de mémoire graphique. Et voilà pourquoi je déteste aéro. C'est pas plus mal. Paramètres audio avancés, donc ça vous pouvez changer. Hein. Paramètres des icônes du bureau. Vous pouvez cocher, donc par exemple ordinateur. Moi je vais mettre ordinateur, c'est utile. Et on a ce PC qui a une icône bien changée. Donc à la corbeille on va changer un petit truc, donc c'est pas pour personnaliser mais je vous conseille, c'est d'afficher la confirmation de suppression, ça peut toujours être utile. Par exemple si je veux effacer le raccourci de Mozilla Firefox, parce que oui hein, c'est pas parce que moi c'est mon cas, c'est pas parce qu'il y a un nouveau navigateur que Microsoft a sorti que je vais pas utiliser Firefox ou Chrome, hein, parce que il a quasi la même vitesse que Internet Explorer, donc voilà. Donc Mozilla Firefox, ici on a la petite confirmation si on veut être sûr de supprimer, tandis que si on retire, voilà, nouveau document texte, et que je le supprime, voilà, direct. Et voilà. Donc les fonds d'écran on a vu. Maintenant on va faire un tour dans les paramètres d'affichage. Donc là c'est pas pour personnaliser, donc on va pas aller là. Dans périphérique non plus. Dans réseau internet non plus. Dans personnalisation oui, parce que nous c'est personnalisé qu'on veut. Choisir un ajustement, donc je vous conseille de faire remplir. Je vous montrerai dans une prochaine vidéo comment on fait pour adapter comment faire pour adapter le fond d'écran à votre résolution d'écran. Donc voilà, c'est pas compliqué. Donc, par exemple, si vous avez une résolution Full HD, donc 1920 sur 1080 pixels, on va l'adapter à cette résolution. Si vous avez un écran HD, tout simplement HD, donc 1280 pixels sur 720 pixels, on va l'adapter pour ça. Si vous avez comme moi un écran d'ordinateur portable, c'est généralement 1600 par 900. Donc voilà, donc moi celui de mon portable c'est 1600 par 900, donc je vais l'adapter. Donc là elle n'est pas encore adaptée, elle est en 1920 par 1080. Donc les photos d'écran que je vais distribuer ils seront dans la description, ils sont en 1920 par 1080. Vous pouvez les redimensionner, je vous montrerai comment faire ça dans une prochaine vidéo. Donc ça fonctionne sur Windows XP, Vista, 7, 8, 8.1, 10. Tous les Windows qui contient l'aperçu Windows. XP je pense pas. Donc l'écran de verrouillage, ça je vous ai montré, aussi et accueil. Ah là, l'accueil c'est intéressant. Pour ceux qui ne le savent pas, le menu démarrer de Windows 10 est redimensionnable. Comme ceci. Ou comme ceci. Ou aussi comme ceci. Mais ce n'est pas tout. Ici dans accueil, on peut utiliser le menu démarrer en plein écran. C'est pour ceux qui aiment bien Modern UI, qui trouvent que Modern UI c'est pratique. Bon, moi j'aime bien comme ça. Ça fait un petit air Windows 8. Donc moi j'aime bien un peu l'affichage de Windows 8. Donc je vais laisser comme ça. Donc afficher occasionnellement des suggestions dans l'écran d'accueil. Je vous conseille de les désactiver ça. C'est pour afficher des suggestions, donc des pubs, donc en gros des pubs. Par contre, allez savoir pourquoi il y a Candy Crush Saga installé par défaut sur Windows 10. Faut pas chercher à comprendre. Apparemment, Microsoft pense que tout le monde joue à Candy Crush Saga. C'est qu'un petit détail. Ça. Afficher les applications les plus utilisées. Donc là, non. Là, oui, si on clique ici. Voilà. Afficher les applications récemment ajoutées, non. Donc moi je laisse non, à vous, vous faites comme vous voulez. Utiliser le menu démarrer en plein écran, moi oui. Parce que j'aime bien, un petit air comme ça. Je trouve ça un peu pratique. Du moins pratique, je trouve ça bien. Afficher les éléments récemment ouverts dans les listes de raccourcis de l'écran d'accueil ou la barre des tâches. Donc voilà. Donc, vous avez compris je pense, donc quelque part ici. Donc voilà, on a un peu fait le tour. Donc voilà à quoi ça ressemble maintenant. Et je vais vous mettre une capture au montage de ce que ça ressemblait avant. Donc voilà, j'espère que ça vous aura plu. N'hésitez pas à mettre un like, à commenter et à vous abonner si vous n'êtes pas encore abonné. À la prochaine.